Hi there, it's Gabriele Nicolet from SpeechKids and Raising Orchid Kids, and today I am delighted to be talking to Evan Weinberger of Illuminos Academic Coaching and Tutoring. I did not.
That's right. It's a mouthful, but you got it.
Evan, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, that's the easy part. I hope you like me.
We already were having a good time before I hit record. So I know that the people who will watch this interview are in for a treat. Would you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do on this planet?
Yeah, of course. So everybody's familiar with this idea of,
oh, there you go. Okay.
Everyone's familiar with this idea of tutoring, right? Traditional tutoring. And so I like to kind of preface with that and say that's not what we do, okay? The truth is we offer those kinds of traditional services. So, the math, the science, the English, the, foreign language, history, standardized test prep. And, listen, I'm a little biased, but I'd say we're quite good at those things. But our bread and butter is what I call academic coaching. Think of it like an executive coaching program for kids, where our focus is those foundational skills that actually teach kids, it helps kids learn how to learn, right? Those foundational skills to juggle those short-term, medium-term, long-term assignments that are being given to them. And by the time they're in middle school or high school, 6, 7, 8 different teachers, add extracurricular activities and other household responsibilities. And kids are pulled in a lot of different directions. And what I hear from kids over and over again, very, very bright kids who cognitively are very capable of doing the work, is that they struggle with the administrative component of school. They struggle with the juggling all those different demands and responsibilities. And so we are, in an elevator, I would say, juggling experts, right? We are juggling instructors, and we help kids build those systems and routines and habits and skills that represent tools, often compensatory, really important compensatory skills for learning differences in some cases, but to help all kids, learning differences or not, neurotypical or not, to navigate those demands on their time. So organization, time management, study skills, prioritizing, problem-solving skills, self-advocating, and all these things are obviously heavily tied to motivation, performance, success, however that's defined, et cetera. So
oh my God, you are
in a nutshell, that's
song.
what we do.
Okay, so I want to break this down because, and I want to go back to the part where you said, these are really bright kids, because what I hear from parents a lot, because I'm dealing with kids who are a little bit younger than the crew, although a lot of them will eventually come to you, is they seem so smart. Why can't they fill in the blank, right? And so how come smart kids can't handle the work, Evan?
Listen, that's the $1 million question. And I think that's why we're in business. And I try every single day to work myself out of a job, because through workshops, et cetera, I want to empower educators, parents, professionals with some tools that they can pass along, to their students. But I would say the answer, in short, is executive function skills. Just because somebody is super duper duper bright and they have the cognitive capacity, right? They've got the neurons are firing, the wheels are turning. It doesn't mean that they can deliver assignments on time. That's a totally different set of skills. So they can do the assignment, they can do it really, really well. But you know what? Depending on the teacher, if you turn it in late, it could be anywhere from a 10% reduction to a 50% reduction to a 0. And so grades and your performance is really, it's a capability plus these soft skills, these executive function skills that really help kids to find that success. So they may have the raw materials, but they need to have that executive function piece in order to juggle all those demands and actually deliver or execute.
And there are some different kind of times when executive function skills are growing and when they sort of are triggered, or if we notice that a child maybe isn't doing so well with executive function, there are some triggering grades, triggering time periods. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, when are there entry points to when families are calling you and being like, it was going fine, but now it's really not fine?
Yeah, so I'll give you the medium length answer to that question. Okay, so of course, families, call us. When I'm thinking about when families call us, families are calling us starting in, maybe third or fourth grade to start building some of those habits and routines. While the topics of the conversations are the same, the presentation is different. So when we're working with a kid that young, the emphasis is on, they're pretty green, right? The emphasis is on building those skills. So they're just starting to get homework and the responsibility of bringing things home and then having to return those things back to school. The work itself isn't necessarily, hard per se, but the focus is on that process of bringing something home and then delivering it back, the next day.
Okay,
And
pause.
so,
if you're a parent watching this whose child constantly loses papers and they're only in second and third grade, ding, ding, ding. Right? You want to ask why. Okay, you don't want to fuss, but you do want to ask why. And you want to put some of this, and we'll get to the strategies in a second, put some of these strategies in place early. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to jump into some of the strategies actually now. We can zoom in more later if you'd like, but the conversations with those younger kids are, hey, here's a list of 7 things to put next to your bedpost or your bathroom mirror. And here are the 7 things you do before you go to bed. Here are the 3 things, and I say 3 instead of 7 in the morning because, kids tend to be, more alert in the evening. And then you finally get them down and they're a little groggy and hard to get out of bed in the morning. So we keep the list a little bit shorter in the morning. And then here are the 2 things you do right when you get home. And here's what you do every time you walk into class. It's a lot about lists and routines and building those habits. I tell families who tell me how forgetful their kids are, when was the last time, your kid called you from school in their 3rd period class and said, Mom, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I forgot to put pants on this morning, right? That never happens, right? There's some things in life that are so habit and they're so routine that we don't forget them. So the name of the game is to create those habits and create those routines as early as possible, right? So I have families that call us then, and then I have families that wait and call me once the problems start to present. And so once the teachers are starting to call home and, or write home and say, listen, Joey's, I'm noticing some patterns and, so sometimes they'll call us then. Sometimes it'll be when they are entering or have just entered middle school, when they go from having 1 or 2 core teachers to having 6 or 7 teachers. And so all of a sudden there's more to juggle. And then sometimes the kids are fine there too. And it's closer to that high school level where they have the same 6, 7 teachers, but now there's so much work that if you don't plan ahead, a kid who is able to listen intently in class and then deliver on tests, quizzes, quests, deliverables by working on things the day before, the day of, all of a sudden in high school, the volume of work has picked up to a point where that's not possible anymore. And so that's when I start to hear from parents saying, oh, I have a really bright kid who's always performed well up to this point, and now we're struggling. And it's because they haven't developed those skills to start studying several days ahead of time. They haven't developed those skills to break those big assignments that can't be all done the day before down into smaller, more manageable chunks. So there are several kind of entry points. We even have families that call us and I tell them it's not too late. Would it have been better if they called me 5 or 10 years ago? Sure. But I have families that call me when their kids are entering or are in college, which is a whole nother animal, and we could do 3 more podcasts just on that, okay? But I have families that call me then. So there's lots of, entry points per se. Another component I think to answering is you got to think about what's happening as kids matriculate through school, right? So in elementary school, it's all about building those foundational skills, those habits, those routines. I was a baseball player, and I'm not incredible at golfing. I need some private lessons because the mechanics of the swing, are different. And everyone said, don't go out there and just figure it out. You need to get a few lessons so that you start doing it the correct way instead of building bad habits. And so, I think that, when kids are young, it's all about helping them build those habits from the start. And then in middle school, it's okay, let's get used to having work being thrown at you from 5, 6, 7 different directions, and then once you've mastered that, for a few years, it builds up, and then you're getting ready for high school, where now they're throwing the volume of work is so great that you have to kind of take those skills to the next level, and be able to plan even further in advance, and et cetera. And then college is a whole different animal where none of your friends have the same schedule. There's limitless distractions. There's always people doing something, pulling you away from work. And it requires, you go from being in class, whatever, 30, 40 hours a week to being in class like 12 hours a week. But you still need to treat it like a full-time job, but that takes an incredible amount of discipline and really strong executive function skills in order to find success. So trust me, there's a longer version answer to that question, but that's the medium version, okay?
Love it, love it. So, okay, I want to back up a little bit. I want to talk about what are some executive function skills, and you've alluded to some of them. It's the ability to stay organized, it's the ability to sort of figure out how many pieces this task needs to be divided into. But you know what, before I ask you that, how did you get into this to begin with?
How did I get into this to begin with? That's a great question. And, my personal journey is, it's an interesting story. I was very lucky, and I understand that more now than I ever did growing up. I understand it and appreciate it more now. I was the oldest of three. I was diagnosed very, very early on with ADD, which now there's just multiple types of ADHD. So now it's ADHD, primarily inattentive type. Although for a few years, some different doctors, said there was a bit of hyperactivity there too. Regardless, some comorbidity with auditory processing issues and reading comprehension issues. And so in short, school was a struggle for me, but I was very lucky, and I didn't even know it at the time. I was the oldest of three. My mother spent a tremendous amount of time and left a little company called Exxon in the accounting department in order to spend a tremendous amount of time with me to help develop what I now know are these executive function skills, because I did struggle. But listen, I was fortunate. My family, had me in a very small academic kind of school environment. I'm Jewish. I went to a little small Jewish school. Essentially my whole life. I graduated a year early in a class of a whopping 11, but I struggled, and I had a live-in shrink growing up. My father was a clinical psychologist, and so I had a unique awareness that I struggled with A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, but I also knew that I was smart, and I knew that from the beginning. And we had every 3 years I had testing done, and so that was huge for me.
This
and I
is
didn't suffer.
huge.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna stop you there for just a second, because the parents who are gonna be watching this are really struggling to, number one, accept, and number two, help their children. We call them Orchid kids because they are just they're hard to teach. They can be hard to reach. They're definitely hard to parent sometimes if we are resisting the way that their brains work. And what I hear you saying is you had two parents, not even just one, who intuitively understood how your brain was working and knew how to structure your environment and teach you strategies so that you could not only understand that, but accept it and use the strategies for your own good. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, it was two-pronged, right? I mean, I was blessed, or I guess three-pronged. I mean, situationally, I was blessed being the oldest of three. Financially, I mean, the private school was small school. I mean, it was expensive all the way through college. So it was fortunate that, and the support along the way, the tutors, the medication management, psychiatrists, psychologists, and a lot of mental health stuff. It's still sticky getting some of those things covered by insurance. So there, financially, that was, a big thing. And then the knowledge, right? So just the fact that I had a father who was in the field, who, for him, he wasn't as lucky. He learned a lot about himself in graduate school, actually, toward the end of undergrad and then into graduate school. And he knew exactly what to look for, early on, for me. So I think it was like that trifecta and the intersection there. And that's really what helped me fast forward to, it really drove me to create this executive function program that, for other families, kind of almost like not a one-stop shop, because we're not psychiatrists and we're not psychologists, but we can do the academic coaching and the tutoring. So it's a 360-degree help as far as the school side, and then we do connect the dots and with the other kind of circles of support, the folks on the other members of the circle of support, in order to make sure that we're all talking to each other for the benefit of the students. So yes, amen. I think you're right on target. But for me, that's when I say I was lucky, I really mean that. I was really lucky. The stars aligned perfectly for me, and it doesn't for a lot of people. And while there's a lot of tutoring companies out there, I didn't see a lot of people, or really anyone at the time. Now there are more, but anyone at the time who was creating a program, recognizing that kids are smart and capable, and helping them with those executive function skills to be able to demonstrate how capable they were, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you are using a strategy right now. You're probably using multiple strategies. So what are some of the strategies that you use in your program?
Yeah, of course. So I'll give you some. It's certainly not exhaustive. Again, we could do 10 more podcasts on this, but our program is on. There's 4 pillars, right? Imagine 4 legs to the table, and we conquer them largely in this order for a reason. So we start with organization. And that's because organization has to do with, organizing your stuff, your physical stuff, and then nowadays your digital stuff too. And so that's equally important is, organizing your digital world and having, kind of folders and naming things appropriately so you can find them, and making sure that it's backed up in the cloud in case, God forbid, something were to happen to your computer, whatever. And then you're actually organizing your stuff and making sure that you have those tools that you need in order to be successful within arm's reach. There's a tremendous amount of research around the fewer steps there are to doing something, the more likely you are to do it, right? And so if you can front load and spend some time making sure that you have plenty of supplies and the right supplies, and that they are as close to within arm's reach as possible, then you are more likely to be successful when the going gets tough, because there are fewer steps to accomplish kind of each thing. It doesn't involve having to go to the store to get colored pencils, because you know what, you have a drawer of colored pencils right here. It just makes that getting started, which is always the hardest, a little bit easier. So we start with organization partly for that reason. And then the other reason is I can't really help a kid if they don't have their stuff, right? And so it's important that we create that system to make sure that at least the things that we're doing together are coming home, or the things that we need to be doing together and looking at together are coming home. And so that's an important kind of starting point. And it extends beyond just their digital and physical stuff, binder, et cetera. It's also their workspace, and pre-COVID, their lockers and, things like that. We have conversations about organization that encompass all of those things. Then we move into kind of the next piece, which is time management. And we define that a little bit differently, more in terms of awareness. So what systems and tools do students have in order to maximize their awareness of what they have to do today and what they should probably start doing today, because the next few days are pretty rough, or next week is pretty wild and crazy, right? And so that's a lot about a planner and a planner system. And there's not necessarily a one size, fits all. I'm still a firm believer that in most cases, I think a paper planner, just to even learn those skills, even if you move to a digital solution later, I really like paper planning. There's just something magical about writing things down, and how you commit things to memory in a different way. But if I'd be lying if I told you I did not put together digital solutions, folks too. So under that time management, we also talk about prioritizing and chunking, breaking big things down into small chunks. So there's a lot of components to that time management piece. And then the third pillar is study skills. And there's a lot of modules under study skills. We cover active reading. We cover test taking strategies. We cover note taking inside and outside of the classroom. Probably in my mind, the most important thing we cover in study skills is, what does that dirty 5-letter word study really mean? Homework is straightforward. How do you, if you have a worksheet with 15 problems on it or questions, how do you know when you're finished? Well, when you are done with the 15 questions, right? I mean, but studying is a different animal, and it's not just this weight on your shoulder that's there until you actually walk in to take a quiz or a test or an assessment. It's actually a process. There is a there is a process to studying, and there is a definitive start and a definitive end, and there are steps in between. And when you finish those steps, you are done studying, and then can move on to the next thing. And so, believe it or not, there's not, for some reason, a lot of schools, public and private, don't offer a course. They just, it's like they think that there's something through some kind of diffusion or osmosis that kids are just going to get it, you know, magically. But it's,
I mean, it's
not
a
true.
little bit, I mean, that is, anyway, that happens across many, many academic and sort of life domains, right? I mean, for a long time, we just thought kids would learn to read, right? And the fact is, here's the thing, here's the problem, right? Most kids do, right? Most kids figure out how much they need to study. Most kids figure out where they're going to put their stuff. And then there's the orchids, the 20% of those, 10% probably have diagnoses. The other 10, maybe they're just kind of clumsy or forgetful or whatever, right? They're the ones. They don't. They need the system. They need the tools explicitly taught to them so that they can use them. Sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah.
No, and then within study skills, you know, it's all about, a lot of it's about learning yourself. So the same thing that works for you may not work for your sibling, may not be the same thing that worked for your parents, and it may not work for the kid that sits next to you in English class, or your best friend. I mean, so there's not necessarily a one size fits all. It's a lot about learning how somebody learns. And then interestingly, the latest research, we used to think that kids were either auditory or they were visual or they were kinesthetic. The latest research says a kid could be visual in one subject, but actually be a kinesthetic learner in a different subject. So even across subjects within the same person, there could be a different approach for classes. And so we account for that and offer up some research-driven techniques for studying to students. And we do so humbly that, hey, this will probably work, and it's worked with a lot of kids with your profile. But if it doesn't, then we move on to the next thing. And, you know, when primarily we work one-on-one with kids, so we're in the trenches with them, and we can kind of see that and make adjustments. And those adjustments are really important. And then the fourth component is that fourth pillar we call impression management. So in my doctoral work, one of the areas of research that was particularly interesting to me is called impression management. It's from the business literature, actually, and it has to do with how through our perceptions, through our behaviors, we can control the perceptions that other people form about us. And so, you know, for example, you know, you run a business too, and I'm sure a lot of listeners now can relate to the idea that you don't enjoy every component of your job or your day necessarily. On a personal level, you know, everybody's got kids watching this, I imagine. And so, you know, you think about, oh, kids, yes, they're the blessing in our lives. I can't imagine what we would do without kids. You know, it's unbelievable. But does it mean you really, truly, genuinely love changing their dirty diapers? No, of course not, right? So sometimes things that we want in life, what comes along with it, the flip side of that same very coin, is something that we don't enjoy, you know, quite as much. And, you know, and that's okay. From a business example, this is fun for me. I love doing stuff like this. But sometimes I have to sit on meetings that are unproductive with people I don't necessarily really like that much. And I still have to get dressed and smile all the same. And I might as well, because I'm there anyway, right? And so the idea is I'm intentionally leaving an impression on that, you know, on the person I'm meeting with, that, hey, I got dressed just for you. I woke up, I was super excited. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, etc. But what I'm really thinking on the inside is, wow, this was such a waste of time. I was so hopeful that this could be productive. And, you know, I'm so happy this is over so I can move on with my day and forget this ever happened, right? But it's all about perceptions. It's through our behaviors, we can, you know, it's not deceitful. It's not, this is just life, right? And it's important to be in tune with how somebody's behaviors. It's easy to act like you enjoy a class if you enjoy a class. It's harder to act like you are enjoying a class for the teacher's sake and for the greater good if on the inside you kind of don't. But nonetheless,
this is like a whole other podcast, like 10 more episodes of this, and like how acting as if I mean, what I hear you saying is we act as if in all situations. So we know we're going to
What
school,
I'm saying is that
right?
acting plays a role in our success, whether we are
Yes.
actually actors or not. I would argue we are all actors, and that there are absolutely benefits to reap from learning how to do that well, manage impressions well, and there are consequences certainly to be had from not doing that well.
I love it.
And so that's the fourth component. As far as specific tips, because I don't want to cheat your listeners, just some quick things. Here's a time timer. It's called a visual time. It's a visual timer called a time timer. I absolutely love this, and there's a growing amount of research about this. It helps with focus. This is not an annoying kitchen timer that ticks. It's distracting. This is actually helps with focus and helps with kids. What helps kids to start to better predict how long things are going to take.
And so a huge deal.
Huge deal. So little things like that. We encourage folks to find kind of a happy place that's like their productive haven at home, where interestingly, it's of course it's nothing too noisy going around, but not too quiet either. That can be distracting too, funny enough. So finding a place that's not the bedroom, that's nothing ever good comes from doing work in the bedroom. You either untrain yourself to get tired and then you can't sleep, or you get sleepy and you don't remember what you're working on. Either way, nothing good comes from working in the bedroom. So coming out of the bedroom and using a time timer and having that place where all of the tools you need are within arm's reach, preferably near a printer, strong internet access, good lighting, lots of drawers full of your favorite pens, pencils, highlighters, calculators, rulers, etc. So we help kids, kind of set that up. Google Drive is for organization is something pretty common that the kids are using. You can back or right click on folders and color code them. A lot of people don't know that.
I didn't know that. I will be using that later.
So a lot of kids go into Google Docs, but if you go to Google Drive instead, you have more powerful management tools over your documents, and you can create Google Docs and Google Sheets and all within Google Drive, but it helps you have that similar kind of organization that you have on your computer. You can manage it that way and even color code folders. So those are just some kind of quick off the cuff, tips for parents here. But again, we could do entire podcasts on any of those, or just zooming in on tips.
Absolutely.
But those are some things that hopefully some parents can potentially implement starting tomorrow.
We're going to have you back, I hope, another time. But in the meantime, if people want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
If people want to find out more about us, we want to find out more about you. And so the best way to reach us is we've got a wonderful website with some great information. Illuminos, ILLUMINOS, illuminos.co. not .com, .co is our website. You can schedule a time to chat with us if that's more convenient for you. Or there's a phone number on there. You can certainly call us at your convenience or email us. Our Instagram, we're active at Illuminos_coaching. And so that is a great way. We post some free tips and some updates about the company and some new offerings that we have, as well as announcements for, just wonderful events like this when we do exciting things like this. So that's a great way to keep in touch with us. And then on Facebook as well, you search for Illuminos, where we're on Facebook. So that's the best way to reach us, and we would love to speak with you and continue the conversation and see if it's a good fit and how we might be able to help your family.
Amazing. I feel like I want to take your program just based on what you were saying earlier. So we'll talk about that later too. Evan, thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thank you for having me, and hope to come back sometime soon.
Take care.